The recent floods in Valencia are the deadliest to hit Spain in decades, killing over 200 people and destroying homes and livelihoods. As the cleanup continues, residents can't contain their anger at the authorities and their slow response. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, mud thrown at the King, shouts of murderer levelled at the Prime Minister, and mass protests on the streets. Spain's already fragile trust in its government has deteriorated further following those deadly floods in Valencia.
Violence erupts on the streets of Valencia. Anger over last month's deadly floods and the regional government's response. Tens of thousands marched in a mostly peaceful protest to demand the resignation of Carlos Mazón, the regional president. Valencia City Hall was smeared with muddied handprints, a symbol of how local people helped with the clear-up efforts themselves. More than 220 people are dead after a year's worth of rain fell in just 8 hours, washing away homes and livelihoods in an instant. The devastating floods have eroded the Spanish public's trust in their leaders. As the King and Queen visited the worst-hit areas in the days after the disaster, angry residents threw mud and shouted murderer at the royal couple. Politicians of opposing sides are all blaming each other as to who bears responsibility. Despite Spain's weather service sounding the alarm ahead of the first heavy rain, the Valencian government didn't send out an alert until evening, giving little time to prepare.
We are fed up, you understand? Fed up. We just wanted to be warned, and we would have been saved.
Thousands of rescue workers and soldiers are still sifting through the mud. But with winter approaching, what next for the already swamped areas? And can people's trust in the authorities ever be restored?
Well, let's meet our guests. In Valencia, local resident and clean-up volunteer Rafa Turegano. Joining me in the studio is Associate Professor in Politics and International Relations, Dr. Pablo Calderon Martinez, and Glada Lahn, who is a Senior Research Fellow at Chatham House. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Rafa, I'll come to you first. Just give me a sense of the feeling of anger on the ground, the people you've been working with, helping, your friends, your neighbours over the last 2 weeks.
It's true that this tragedy has affected somehow everyone around us. Everybody has been checking on your family, your friends since the first moment, because we did not have any advice. We did not know what was going to happen. And so the first thing that came up to our mind was to check on family. I have my mom's side of the family who lives up in the mountain where the floods also affected the great area around the river. And the first thing was really also a shock among all of us because, we have not seen that before. It's true that Valencia has some experiences with floods, but not in these greater dimensions. So we did not have information in a promptness timing. So we had to take up the meanings of the communications with our friends, with the social media, and to check how the roads were going to get cleaned and whatever everyone needed. So we had to, and the things that we could help them.
And Rafa, just tell me, how angry were the people? You know, you've been speaking to them every day. How angry are people there?
Yeah, the people are really asking for politics responsibilities, and they are really angry because the politicians have not been there to help. They have not been there on our side to ask for the needs of the people, and they have been actually arguing between the central government and the autonomical government, and we have seen that the collaboration between them is basically inexistent. So this makes people very angry because we have a lot of memes in Spain. Spain is a country which has developed in the recent years, like a lot of infrastructures. We had, for example, a center for emergencies right outside of Valencia, and this center of the emergency advice and calls wasn't used until the catastrophe and the tragedy was here with us. So this is the most frustrating thing, is that we have a lot of means in the country, but they are not collaborating to actually help the people and to listen to the needs that they have in this situation, which is changing day by day.
Thanks, Rafa. I want to get to Glada.
Thank you.
Glada, I've seen it said this week that climate scientists have been warning about this, the possibility of something as bad as this happening in this part of Spain for years, and that advice went unheeded.
Yeah, so, I mean, even a few days before, the National Meteorological Agency was warning of something coming, a heavier than usual rainfall. Those warnings became more intense the days before. And certainly, yes, in the preceding years, there have been the once in 125 years storms in the past, and they have become more frequent. And so we are seeing this pattern of stronger, more intense and less predictable patterns of rainfall. And I think the difference being that the rain comes down heavy in a much shorter period of time than it has done before. So as Rafa says, Valencia has suffered through the history of the city with flooding. There is a river, there are flood-prone areas, but not to this level of intensity.
We've got conversations going on at COP about climate change, about catastrophes hitting the planet. There can be no disputing this. This is linked to what we're seeing. We're seeing more intense storms, incidents like a year's worth of rainfall in 6 hours.
In a few hours, exactly. I think they're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 400 litres per square metre in certain areas, really, really damaging levels. What we're seeing is a combination of course, urban build-up, higher density areas. There is certainly issues with building on floodplains, for instance, that has caused these events to have a more damaging effect on the local populations. But we are seeing a change in the frequency and the erraticness, really, of this. And it's because as the world warms, they say for every degree of that warming, on average globally, the atmosphere holds around 7% more water. Now, what happens is that can be to a much greater degree in certain areas because the sea level temperature can rise. The water evaporates, the clouds hold more water as they moved, for instance, in this case, towards the Spanish coast and the mountains. They hit the cold front and it comes down much heavier because there's much more water in those clouds, to put it bluntly. So what we are seeing is more of these events which you can tell that they will happen, but you don't know exactly where they will strike.
Pablo, give us your reading of the Spanish leadership on this, and I use the word leadership in inverted commas here. It's been completely missing, hasn't it?
It has, and I think if it wasn't so tragic, it would be almost comical, the way the reaction. Particularly, I would divide it into two different fronts, if you wish, different reactions, which fall within party political lines, but I don't think it's necessarily a political message. We have the reaction first of the local government, the regional government in Valencia, which was pretty much non-existent. And for what we know, the leadership was really, literally absent when the crisis was evolving, so there wasn't a real immediate reaction. And then you have a very slow reaction from the national government that I think they were very tepid at the beginning. I think they were very careful and conscious of not stepping on the toes of the regional government. We have to understand Spanish politics, the dynamics that exist between regional government and national government are complex, to say the least. So I think the national government was maybe a little bit too worried about how this was going to play out with the regional government. The reaction was really, really slow. When there was a reaction, it was completely the wrong way, with Pedro Sanchez and the king going to the disaster area, which was terrible optics. It didn't help out. I think they underestimated the anger on the ground, which I think surprised me and possibly others as well. But I think they misread the situation completely. And now we see a situation where it's pretty much volunteers that are taking care of the cleaning up, the clearing up, the rebuilding of the city.
Guys like Rafa.
Exactly, guys like Rafa that are doing the work. And it seems that the authorities are nowhere to be found. And a lot of this is evidence, and it's caused, I think, by a complete lack of preparedness, right? As we were saying before, these events do happen, and we know they're going to happen. We just don't know when and how. So to some extent, it's impossible to prepare perfectly for these sort of natural disasters. Right?
And Pablo, as a Spaniard, how did you feel seeing mud thrown at your royal family when they turned up? People in the UK were shocked.
I think it's an interesting comparison. I think if you compare it to the United Kingdom, for example, I don't think you would ever see the British royal family put themselves in that position. So I think it's a miscalculation of the feeling, and very unlike the royal family, not in Spain, but anywhere in the world, royal families are very careful and perfectly choreographed in everything they do. This seemed to me like a very big error in terms of understanding the situation. They put themselves in a terrible position, a terrible situation. And I think the anger is understandable once you see the devastation on the ground. I don't think you could have expected any other possible outcome.
Rafa, talk to me about how people were feeling then when the royal family turned up. I mean, there's death, devastation. We're seeing people's homes flooded, towns and villages flooded. And the Spanish royal family seemed to think that this was a good photo opportunity.
Yeah, that's what most people felt, actually, and we felt that they didn't bring any help with them, and that was the most negative point of this, because in that moment they just came with their empty hands, and they didn't bring their equipment or didn't bring people who would actually tackle the situation and give us a solution as a town. We were all just cleaning the streets, and they blocked the entrance to the volunteers on certain areas. And we didn't understand that, because the people in the town, they were saying, "Oh, we really need you. We haven't had any help still from the government or from the bigger forces that we have in the state."
Rafa, tell me, is it true it took 14 hours for a text message to go out warning people about what was coming, and by which stage people receiving the text message were actually in the middle of the devastation?
Yes, well, this is actually the center of the debate, because, as I said before, we have this center just next to Valencia, which is in charge of sending the warnings. And there was a warning from the meteorological station here in Spain from a few days before, and also in that exact morning, that the region of Valencia was gonna be hit by a huge storm and a really big amount of rain. So that was sent in the morning to the autonomical government, and they actually came up in the news saying around 1 p.m. that the storm was gonna calm down, and it was gonna go away around 6 p.m. And that was not really true. That wasn't really what the meteorological station had said to them. So this is, for example, a really, really big lie that even the president of the autonomical region had to delete from his social medias, because it was just totally not true. And then this warning, it appeared at around 8 p.m. in the evening, and since that morning there were floodings in the region of Valencia. Around 11 or 12 in the midday, there were floodings up in the mountain. So we don't understand why they did not stop all their work, all their other responsibilities to come for this. And in my opinion, this is more to do with the climate deniers, because whenever they get a warning from scientists or from other institutions, they always just deny it, and they just go to the next thing, because they don't want to give any importance to these topics, because they think this might affect the economy, but we see that in the end this is way more damaging to neglect and deny the effects of the climate change, and also for the safety of the people.
Thanks, Rafa. Glada, Rafa mentions a phrase there, climate deniers. Nobody can deny that this amount of rainfall in 5 or 6 hours is unprecedented. You simply can't deny that what we're seeing is climate change related.
These events are getting stronger and they're getting more damaging. So I think, you know, from those who don't want us to act more strongly on climate change, you know, globally, regionally, whatever, there is a tendency to downplay the attribution to climate change, if they mention it at all. There's an effort to say, I think as Mazón did, be careful of disinformation, you know, and try to take people's minds off it. And as Rafa said, this emphasis on the economy. As we saw during COVID, from some governments who wanted to focus on GDP growth and keeping everything running as normal, to keep businesses running and not face the political backlash they might do from those businesses, they leave it till the very last moment to come in with preparations. And we know from that experience of COVID that more people die if you do not prepare your societies in time.
Pablo, talk to me about this regional president, Carlos Mazon. I read reports that on the day in question, he had a very nice long lunch and he didn't turn up until late into the evening.
Those are the reports, and more damaging than that, I think, is the idea that nobody could make a decision. The decision was not being taken whilst the president of the region was unavailable and unreachable for some reason. Apparently, he went for a very long lunch with a well-known journalist in the region, and then he was unreachable for a couple of hours more. So by the time he actually was reached, he had to be debriefed. And once he was debriefed and he was in the process of being debriefed, then the alert could go out, as you said, once the devastation was already unfolding. So I think the problem here is that it delayed the whole reaction. And you know, the key issue as well is the part of the political arrangement in the region and the marriage of convenience with the far right does lean to this idea of climate change is a hoax, and they took away funding a lot from the regional organization, the regional office for protecting climate change and coordinating efforts against climate change, because for the far right, climate change doesn't exist. So you said nobody can deny it. Apparently some people can and do deny that this is anything to do with climate change. And unfortunately, some of those people are part of the regional government in Valencia. And I think that played a big part in this sort of downplaying of the emergency. It's going to be fine. I heard reports that people were still forced to being at work whilst the devastation was taking place, and people were not allowed to leave work because it wasn't declared officially an emergency, even though you could see with your own eyes what was happening on the streets. It was really a terrible reaction to this tragedy. There's no way to react imperfectly, but there's a way to do it poorly, and this is the worst way to do it.
And Pablo, a point to you. Mazon is speaking to your parliament. What do you expect him to say? Will this just be kind of cover up and nothing to see here, or will he come clean?
I would imagine so, but as far as I can tell, he's even losing support from his own party, the Partido Popular, who understand this has been a tragic way of doing it. Even the right-wing media in Spain is starting to turn on the regional government and the Partido Popular, and I think, if anything, the Partido Popular will probably try to cut ties, and I don't see a way back. It's impossible to see a way back. You have hundreds of deaths, complete devastation, and the fact is, the guy was never to be seen, nowhere to be seen, and there was simply no political leadership whatsoever at the time when Valencia really needed some leadership, and I don't see how you can come back from that.
Rafa, do you worry that this might happen again? I know you've been out doing brilliant work with your friends, helping your neighbours and families in the villages. Do you worry that this might become a more regular event in the Valencia region?
Yes, totally. We have that feeling that this might happen again, and we are not sure when. We cannot know, but I think we should work on it as soon as possible, and we shouldn't lose any more time, because actually right now the roads are collapsed, all the water management of the area is going to have big problems to come back to normal life. So I think we have to actually think already on how we're going to tackle this issue, and we're gonna solve the problem for the next time, because as we saw in Valencia decades ago, they built a new river tide that wouldn't cross the city. So for example, this was very innovative in the moment, and we followed that, and now it helped to save a lot of lives. So we have to continue, and we have to take this crisis to change the way we are building, and the way we manage the water as well, and the way we manage these warnings and these alerts, because this is really important, and we have to be ready since now. We are already late. Yeah.
Glada, some people are blaming poor political management. Others are saying it's all to do with climate change. But ultimately, there's a connection here, isn't there? The politicians need to start working with the scientists and actually listening to what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always these disasters that we are seeing from weather-related events. They're always the two things are interconnected, because you have often years of poor governance, poor decisions being made around the uses of land, around the management of dams. I mean, I hear in Valencia there was a dam that could have been drained in the summer that would have, allowed to hold the water off a bit longer. There's the actual the build-up along the areas that should be able to be drained and hold the water. There needs to be very tough planning rules around those. And I think the reconstruction, in a way, is a chance to make those areas more flood resilient. And then as both of the panelists have mentioned, there's the actual preparations, there's the investment in emergency response and preparation, there's the investment in local community awareness. And as Rafa said, and people have come out and contributed their efforts, worked hard to try and clean this up without really the help of the government. They need to be given credit for that and hopefully given the resources they need to respond in future. I heard that the government had even turned down help from Catalan fire authorities and also from France, and it was really left to the local people. So they need to be given more resources and credit for what they did, but the investment needs to be in the public services as well to be able to prepare for these events.
Pablo, give us a sense of where this incident sits in Spanish history. 220 plus people dead, devastating pictures that we saw on our TV screens. People could not believe this was Spain that they were looking at. Where does it sit in terms of terrible events that your country has witnessed and the poor leadership, really, that's off the back of it?
I think in terms of poor leadership is high up there. I think I can't remember anything quite as bad as this. The way that the crisis has been handled by every single level of government. So it also shows and evidences a lot of the more structural issues with the Spanish system, the Spanish political system, the lack of coordination that exists between regional government, national government, the fact that the national government couldn't really do more. And it's a very complex political system, and it's complex for a reason, right? And there was a lot of tweets and people saying, like, well, what is the army? Where is the army providing and saving everything? It can't really work like that in Spain. So there are issues there that are structural about the way Spanish is put together, but also clear issues about political leadership, and in particular the way some of the leaders have started to play politics with it and how they let politics get in the way of their primary responsibility, which is to look after the citizens. And all the evidence suggested that there was every opportunity to avoid not the whole tragedy, but to definitely make it a lot less bad than it was. And the leadership missed every single opportunity to do so, and that is really unforgivable. So I can't really think of any other instance in that particular scenario. In terms of natural disasters, obviously unprecedented, happens more and more. So it's undeniable, right? I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 2019 maybe it was, there was another similar flood, and it was talked about as the worst in a century in Valencia. 5 years later, here we are again, and probably in another 5 years' time, we're going to be here again. So the government needs to learn and needs to prepare better, for sure.
Rafa, just give us a sense, I want to end on a positive note, just the sense of pride you're getting and feeling from your friends, helping others, building back, and trying to get over this utter tragedy.
Yeah, well, it's been unbelievable to have all this support from all the friends and the family from all ages. I was with my granddad learning how to clean up all the mess, how to stay also in calm, and how to always be ready to help. And also it's been really, overwhelming to see everyone going to the centers of donations to bring as many things as we can to offer help. I was in WhatsApp groups, so I really want to be hopeful about the society and the young people that is coming and is coming really ready for like getting together and just helping each other and being very humanitarian, because we need to feel the support of each other since we have been abandoned from the institutions.
Thanks, Rafa. Glada, COP29 continues. Will this even feature on the agenda? Political leaders who say they don't believe in climate change. We've got Donald Trump, who is on record as saying it's a hoax.
Yeah, there's a lot resting on COP29, and the global atmosphere globally is not conducive to having such a cooperative conversation this year. However, the focus is on climate finance this year in Baku. We need a lot more climate finance to go into adaptation while not neglecting that mitigation is essential, because for every fraction of a degree of warming, these events are going to get worse. What we would like to see, of course, is progress on the global goal for adaptation. I think water and increasing disasters will be on the table. I think they will be raised as much as possible at the event. It should be a point around which governments really coalesce and galvanize their action. But politics will probably get in the way.
Pablo, final point to you. Valencia, a region that many people all over Europe love. It's in people's hearts. They will bounce back from this.
Of course, that's undeniable. And I think credit to a lot for the people of Valencia for coming together. I don't think they should have, right? I don't think this is responsibility of the people to do these things. So I think we have to be certain here that there is a lot of political blame, right? And obviously immediate political blame for the regional government, for the national government. But of course, Valencia will bounce back and it'll be hopefully stronger than ever. But I really hope that people learn and the government learns the lessons here. And particularly people understand that climate change is real and it has serious consequences and real-life consequences on the ground. And it's not a waste of money. You have to prepare for these events. You have to plan for the worst and always prepare for the worst. And I think that's really what failed in Spain in this occasion. And I really hope Spanish government learns a lesson.
Pablo, Glada and Rafa in Spain, thank you so much for your time on this. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.